All right. All right. Thank you for joining us today for the Trino contributor call on the 24th of April, 2024. We have a few topics here to discuss, and then obviously we are open to talk about anything else. Do you want to start us off with Java 22, where we're at with that, Martin?
Yeah, so let me try to page this back in. So we are the code compiles, can compile and run with Java 22. We still require Java 21 for building Trino. Then the Docker image that we publish includes Java 22 already. So the idea is that people can download the image, try it out, use it in their testing or even production workloads and report any issues. So far, we haven't seen anything. We haven't got any reports of any problems. I actually don't expect there to be many problems. So I think we're getting close to being ready to switch Trino to use Java 22 for building the project, which means it will be required for runtime.
Yeah, the PR for that is ready, and it's just a question of potentially getting feedback from any of you if there's any issues or any problems that you found with using Java 22. So,
yeah, and specifically, so Java 22 has a couple things that are very appealing. So if you're not running Java 22, you should try it because it helps with garbage collector issues. So they fix some long-standing issue in the G1 garbage collector that can cause processes to appear to run out of memory when they actually have plenty of memory. It's just an issue with object getting garbage collection preventing. Sorry, no, it's the other way around. It's calls to native code that place a lock on the heap. They prevent garbage collection from running, which means that the process can start from being able to get memory, and then the VM just fails with an out of memory error. There are some places where that can happen if especially if you're reading gzip compressed data, which gzip requires calling out to native code, so it can trigger that problem. So Java 22 will help with that. So that's one of the reasons we're trying to move to that.
so at this stage, 44 or 45 is the Docker container with Java 22, and the PR is ready. 45 is out. 46 is coming this one next week, I'm guessing. So maybe 46 or 7 or 8 or something like that. Pending any negative feedback, we'll probably have to run for Java 22. Is that correct?
Right. Yep.
Yeah, cool. So if anyone has any issues with that, let us know. Anything else about Java 22?
No, that's pretty much it.
Okay. Cool. So the next topic we have on the agenda here, Mateusz is not here, but I can sort of like chime in or ask on that. So the Phoenix connector in Trino pulls in a massive amount of shaded jars and transitive dependency jars that ultimately are quite old and cause a lot of security issues in the sense that they show up in reporting, right? Like obviously, since we have separate class loaders and stuff, if you don't use the connector, then those are all false alarms anyway. And even if, then they're probably also false alarms, but it still causes issues for people. And we don't currently not really know how much the Phoenix connector is used. We don't have the resources to really fix it up. We're trying to upgrade it to like newer Phoenix versions, but our main question now is, is there anyone out there using the Phoenix connector and potentially interested in helping us with that? Or how does the community feel about potentially removing that connector? One option could be that we remove it out of the default tarball and Docker container, but still leave it in the code base, or remove it entirely and people can take it over elsewhere. Those are the kind of things that we are contemplating. I'm not sure, Martin, is there a precedence for any connector that was removed in the past or something like that we could figure this out with?
No, we haven't. I mean, I don't think we have removed any, but so I will say, like, if you go and follow some of the of the issues and the threads, there's people working on interested in working on those. So I don't think removing necessarily the right thing to do here. Of course, if no one's using the connector, then it makes no sense to continue to support it. Like that, and that's true of any other connector. But I think there are people that are actively interested in working and helping with those.
Yeah, we'll have to find them. Like Mateusz and myself reached out to the Phoenix team themselves, and they provided some sort of paths that might help a bit, but like not sure how far we can take that. Brian, you raising your hand.
I'm raising my hand. Yeah. So my opinion here, and I'll just throw it in there and see if anybody else on the call or maybe afterwards agrees. But I think that it's not that this needs to go away entirely, but I do think that like this is something that's possibly there to cause deployment blockers in my mind. Like I see it as that's the weight that I see the Phoenix connector adds to it. It's not to say that I bet there are plenty of people still using it. And it's not to say that it shouldn't be like somehow kind of used, but I feel like now we have this sub project kind of level for things. And I think there are some plugins like I could say the same thing maybe about a Cumulo, but maybe it's not even causing too many problems. So we don't care if the Cumulo is there. But if it's causing problems, like when it comes to dependency management or anything that could bring in like security vulnerabilities to, again, false alarm, but still something that will raise up a potential issue and cause maintenance, more maintenance that needs to be done. I'd rather the maintainer's time be focused on more valuable things because it's already kind of spread pretty thin. So not to say that we get rid of this out of the Trino project or like the Trino Software Foundation project, but maybe demoting it to kind of like something that would exist in a in the sub project, and then you have like a small amount of like documentation that tells people how to load it in if they're still using it as a sidecar thing.
So so a couple of things on that. One is if someone has issues with the connector in their deployment, they can just delete it from the tarball. That's I mean, Trino does. If you're not using it, then Trino won't care if it's not in the binary distribution. So you can go and delete it. The issue with moving it out of the main Trino project into a separate repo is that we still continue to make changes that occasionally break the connector SPI backward compatibility. So if it's not in the main repository, then the changes are not going to happen at the same time. Someone may, I mean, we may not even notice we're breaking something.
But then you just add a test, right? To the, like, you could add a test to the, I think we have to do similar things for the other sub projects, no? Where they have to have tests on.
No, they all stand separate enough. I think there might be a middle ground where you just don't include it into the tarball by default in Docker container, but still have it in the main repo and stuff like that. There's various ways in between, but ideally, I think if we can get it improved enough to be acceptable, then that might be a step. Otherwise,
I also just think splitting it out for the fact that the build takes a long time, right? And I know that there's shortcuts around that for local builds and things like that, but then it's just when somebody's first coming in and trying to play around with it, it's just like having too many things on one place versus, okay, this is only of interest to somebody who's maintaining this, and we have sub project maintainers that do that, and they'll be alerted to say, oh, okay, we need to fix something about this external like HBase issue that doesn't work well with the current thing, and it doesn't have to stop a deployment, or it doesn't have to slow anything down. It literally is just like that breaks somewhere else, and everything else in the main deployment is green. So that's another, I think it'll just speed things up, and it'll provide a good template on how we manage these things moving forward if they become less popular. So
the build taking longer. I mean, one connector is not going to make or break anything, and
but multiple would, yeah.
they would, and if we had to remove things, there are other connectors we should remove before we even remove Phoenix. Like for example, Raptor is a connector that no one uses.
Yeah.
So, but then we have to have a larger discussion of, well, what is
How
the
does it work and stuff?
criteria for putting things, some connector outside or inside? Like for example, I know if we go through the whole list, like Redis, does anyone use Redis?
Not the current one, right? Or wait, no, that one got updated though. Didn't recently, didn't it? What?
No,
It
we
did.
didn't get those contributions.
So that exists outside, and that's fine. Like I think if we made a list and maybe just wrote this down in the notes this time, it's not anything we have to do tomorrow, but it is something I think that is valuable to keep discussing here and there, because over time we don't want to just keep adding and adding and adding. We want to also have a process to like take things to slowly deprecate certain things out of there when they're not as popular and causing security issues, build issues, deploy issues, and all these other potential things. It'll just make the project, especially with a rate of deployment that Trino goes at, right? It's like it'll just be a lot nicer to not have less things to potentially go wrong each week.
Well, so we talked about at some point having a, I mean, especially this might be more feasible with the notion of dynamic catalogs. But have a way to say, have a kind of a registry of connectors and plugins that you can install after the fact, and then the Trino really wouldn't come with any connectors. You would just say, you install it, it doesn't have anything. You say, oh, install this connector, install that connector, or maybe you can pre-package something, set of connectors that you care about. But that requires a bunch of other infrastructure and changes and so on. Again, the main issue right now is how do you make sure that Trino evolves without breaking the connectors?
Yeah.
Because sometimes we change behavior in the engine that it causes a bug in Trino that can only be observed in a specific connector. I'm not saying that Phoenix is one of those, but we've seen cases like that. So if we start removing things, we may not be able to catch certain kinds of problems.
But I think that still, like, you could say that about any test you remove and just make a case that you should never remove any test, period. I think that the thing I would say that we should slowly work towards is, deciding what is in, what isn't in terms of what matters to the core engine being tested. And I still think these things, especially if we're still considering them like managed under the Trino software foundation, I still think that like having a method that we set up over time that would be like, a build happens on on the Trino core, and then that would then trigger a build in the other repositories, or like, let's say a separate HBase repository, and then it's not necessary. It'll be a question that you can go investigate for the bug aspect, and you actually catch those issues. But then in terms of whose responsibility, or does this stop anything for the main release, that is something that we don't have to worry about. We could say, hey, we can move forward with the release, and then people who are maintaining the HBase connector, it's much clearer that they have to solve for that problem, or else you're stuck on the previous version of Trino for that time.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are things that we need to think about in terms of how we make the package smaller. How do we, improve the speed of the build, I guess reliability in some cases, that the infrastructure for testing some connectors is flaky, so it affects the ability to move faster on the engine side and so on. I mean, we should look at all those things. I don't want to I think we shouldn't be singling out the Phoenix connector as the one thing that
it's not no. And I'm not trying to do that for HBase is a good, it's a good example. It's a good initial conversation starter for this larger discussion.
So I just noticed that Mateos joined us. He was closely involved in the removal PR and talking also to the to the people in the Phoenix project. Mateusz, do you have anything to add in that sense? Where we're at with that? Is there any path that is feasible at this stage?
So Manfred, Viraj is raised his hand, so
yeah, Viraj, are you? Yeah, maybe you should go first. Viraj, can you hear us? Viraj Chaisani, you're muted. But you'd have to unmute yourself.
He said he's unable to unmute himself, unfortunately. If you can get to where you unmute or can work on, actually, can you unmute him? Whoever's the host, Manfred.
I can only do the ask to unmute, but that doesn't do anything. So,
oh, okay. Viraj, if you could,
maybe you
log out and log back into Zoom or something, and then bring your hand back up later.
Yeah. Mateusz, do you want to let us know a bit about where we're at with the Phoenix stuff? Like what you found from the changes that are in the Phoenix upgrade?
So I just did an initial update to the new version. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's hard for me to tell why sometimes it's getting stuck. I've seen a lot of failures in the product test, which seems related to the startup itself. So I think that the queries are trying to be run against the server that it's not fully like up, and it's causing those queries to stuck. And I don't like understand why it's happening, and I don't understand what is the condition that I should like watch for before I actually run some queries. So that's one thing, and the I don't recall how it's called, the mini edge-based cluster. It's also flaky, so sometimes it works locally, sometimes it doesn't. So, but I didn't have much time to look into this. So,
yeah. So ideally, if you can get
the changes compile, so at least you can try this out. But these are not stable yet.
Okay, cool.
And they are not improving the fact that the new release also has a lot of CVs, because we are still using the FAT client. I know that there is bring your own Hadoop something library with this release, but I guess that it requires some rework of the connector, right?
Actually,
at the dependency level.
So there are no code changes needed to use that. Only dependency level changes are necessary. So the same code should work with the MapReduce jar.
So, but then if there is no Hadoop in it, like why is it not like missing those dependencies then, or what's the problem? Like
it's the bring your own Hadoop. So the old one, the Phoenix client embedded that as far as I know you are using now, it has got both Hadoop and HBase shaded into it. But
if it's not shaded into it, wouldn't like, does it actually work then? Because we don't bring our own Hadoop.
Yeah, so basically you need to add a few more dependencies, external dependencies, but you can version manage those independently. So that's the point, that this requires about 5 hours. So this requires on one hand a Hadoop stack, some Hadoop jars, and the HBase shaded client jar, which is a single jar. I haven't tested, but in theory, it should also work with the shaded Hadoop client jar. I didn't look into that very much. So this would mean adding one HBase jar, additional HBase jar, and depending on whether the shaded Hadoop client can be used or whether the unshaded Hadoop must be used, it's either, I think, 2 Hadoop jars, or it's a number of Hadoop jars, like, I don't know, a dozen of Hadoop jars. But the point here is that you can update this independently, so that, say, Phoenix 5.2 is right now built with Hadoop 3.2.4 and HBase 2.5.8, I believe. But say if in a few months there will be, but you can already run it with Hadoop 3.3.6, so you can just use that different. So if you depend on Hadoop directly, and you can update to the latest Hadoop directly, and the same goes for the latest 2.8. So if there's a CVE in HBase 2.8 and HBase 2.10 fixes it, then you can, in most cases, unless if there are no breaking API changes, then you can just upgrade either version independently and get rid of those CVEs. So only the CVEs that are actually in the Phoenix shaded part, so in this reduced bring your own Hadoop and bring your own HBase version are present. Those are the only ones that they would need a new Phoenix release.
Okay, so we could potentially pull in, like explicitly manage those dependencies and pull them in from upstream, and
Yeah,
then
and yeah, that's the whole idea. So basically, once you have the dependencies shaded, in order to like do something with that, you need to unshade, patch, and shade again. And we did that in the past to get the Phoenix working with the JDK 17. And there was some problem with Zookeeper using the inet address to string, which was incorrect usage. They changed the representation. So we basically unshaded, patched, and shaded again, like on our side. But it's like a cumbersome operation, so we don't want to do that. So it's much easier. On one hand, it's much easier to upgrade those dependencies if they're not shaded. On the other hand, you need to settle these dependencies so they not conflict with other parts of the system. But I think that we are pretty good at that. So
Yeah,
yes,
so
that might be the best approach to basically do the bring your own Hadoop, but actually like just manage those dependencies up from upstream on our own.
yeah, and we have our own Hadoop fork with some patches applied to get like stuff like Kerberos working on different JDKs.
Okay.
So it's still like better for us to use what we actually know and support.
yeah, so if you have that, then you can probably just use that for Phoenix.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if we can make that happen. Martin will sync up later on like how to pull that, who to pull in, and maybe work on that. Okay.
I was also thinking
and-
about this. I recall that Phoenix also has something like the query server, which moves the translation logic on the server side, as far as I understand it. But I don't know whether this is option for us to switch to.
So
it.
basically, Phoenix Query Server, yes, it does exactly that. So it's a trade-off because for you have just a very small Avatica client. Basically, the Phoenix Query Server client is just Avatica. This is just an Avatica client. I don't know if you use it elsewhere already. But the trade-off is that performance-wise, you had the bottleneck with PQS, so it's fine.
Yeah, because you will be single-threaded, right? Because it's
not necessarily single-threaded, but basically, so you are pushing. So what happens here is that you are running your Phoenix client single process, or rather instance, on the query server, and then you are just pushing basically the JDBC, the SQL queries
Yeah.
to the server. The server connects to all the hosts, so it does all the distributed processing and collating and marshalling of the results, and then sends it back. So it's fine for mostly smaller data sets, but if you are really moving large amounts of data, then you can easily run into bottlenecks, which don't happen with the direct client because you are not doing the marshalling and marshalling steps.
yeah.
You can distribute it and run. I don't know how Trino works, but basically you can just partition your query and run it from many clients, for example.
I think that the read is actually partitioned. So yeah, I think that this option is still better than the query server.
Yeah, so it's the main query server's main use points are that it's much simpler. You can implement it in any language that you want that has a protobuf compiler and that can support Avatica, and it doesn't need all that network connectivity that HBase does to all of the clusters. So you can have a single choke point and route all traffic via that. Yeah, but mostly you can just treat it as any other SQL or JDBC client. So you won't be able to use these MapReduce integrations and these kinds of stuff via the query server.
Cool. Well, it looks like we have a few paths to explore to go forward, I think. So we'll figure that out.
And also Hadoop has recently released 3.4.0. So I think I'm not claiming that all the CVEs have been addressed, but there have been significant work done to address many CVEs. And so it might take like a couple of months for HBase to consume Hadoop 3.4 and release a version which can later be consumed by Phoenix. So that could also be one of the path. And but what we can do is, like, from this point onward, like we can make Trino to support only Phoenix 5.2 plus versions, and I can help take 5.2 work in Phoenix and debug if there is any test failures, and I can work on that PR if you like. And once the 5.2 is in, then we can explore the options that Istvan just mentioned.
That would be excellent. That was you talking, Viraj.
Yeah. Earlier, my iOS setting were like a bit messed up. For sorry about that. So I was not able to. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's connect separately later. Maybe we'll make a Phoenix Slack channel or something like that.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah.
That's great progress. Thank you, everyone. And special also thank you, Istvan and Viraj, to jump in from the Phoenix ecosystem into this call, which is kind of not your problem. We put you into the problem, so to speak.
Well,
yeah,
it's used as much as possible. And support it.
Cool. Martin, we're good with that topic then, I think?
Yep.
Okay, so next one is incremental refresh for materialized views. This is something that's been going on, working with other maintainers. I think there's nothing detailed to report apart from we're working towards that with various companies. Nobody is here from that effort, so I think we can sort of table that for now. And this is obviously only for the Iceberg connector. Brian is here from Tabular, and we're working with Apple and others, but I don't think there's anything specifically to report at this stage, right?
No. I am curious, did we get any I haven't looked at this lately, but and actually, yeah, Dane I think is one of the ones looking at it, but anything further that anybody heard of on the view support? I think we're waiting actually to hear back from David. Is David available?
David is not here, and
not here today. I'm thinking, but is he going to be available sometime to maybe potentially meet on that? Because I think there's just a lot to, some agreement that needs to happen. It's not like there's technically much more to do. It's just we need to know how we're doing certain things.
So Brian, sorry, you're talking about views in Iceberg.
Iceberg views, yeah. Okay,
so that's completely different from incremental materialized view refresh.
Right. This was just a separate subject that I wanted to bring up real fast, just because it's something that we've blocked on. Currently, Iceberg views are something we can kind of do with Spark, and I know a lot of people, particularly Apple, have also been wanting to start building on that. So is David going to be around any time this week? Do you think that we could maybe pull together a separate meeting for that?
I mean, unfortunately this week we're at an offsite, so it's going to be tough.
Okay. So then possibly, when's the next, is contributor call going to be following week as well, or 2 weeks?
We're trying to do it once a month or so. So I'm not sure.
Once a month. Okay.
I mean, but reach out to David on Slack and.
Yeah, I just haven't gotten any answers from him recently. So I'll maybe if I'll try to bug him and see if he can be at the next contributor call. That'd be good.
Awesome. Cool. Kent, the stage is yours.
Hello. Yeah, so Remitly is looking at putting resources behind implementing lateral column aliasing. We have a lot of internal users who really make heavy use of that feature in Redshift. So hasn't been added to our project roadmap yet, but we're going through the process to add that. So really, I wanted, since I'm new to the Trino development, I was kind of looking for some feedback on what might go into a design for this feature. Martin and I have talked about, or Martin has given me a lot of feedback on edge cases to look at. I suppose the main thing is I would like to front load project drifts if possible. So is there any situations that would preclude adding LCA to the Trino project altogether?
Yeah, so I think what we need to do first is try to, if you look at how other projects have implemented it, it seems like a bit haphazard. They work in some cases, they don't work in others. They made a bunch of trade-offs that may not be the same trade-offs we want to make. So I think it would be useful to do a survey of how others have done it, what the limitations are, how it works for every case, because it's one of those features that touches everything. It touches all the scoping rules. It touches it interacts with all sorts of, because it's in the select clause. You have to interact with the order by, with aggregations, with window functions. So you have to figure out how they work, or if we can get an understanding of how other products work, then we can figure out, okay, this is what's reasonable, this is what's not. And these are the places where if we have to make we might need to make a trade-off. I mean, I know already of one of those places, and then we can decide, is this a trade-off we want to make, or is the trade-off acceptable?
Okay, yeah.
Specifically, the case I'm thinking about is there's that issue with so in the case of shadowing, which alias wins? Is it the one in the from clause or in the one in the select clause? And in one of those cases, it's a surprising behavior, and in the other case, it's an incompatibility with the SQL standard. So we have to decide. I mean, we have to first understand, are there any other places where that type of trade-off happens? How bad is it? And then are we okay with accepting the potential surprising behavior that users may see? So anyway, I mean, I think that we still need to research a bit and see what others are doing.
Okay. So yeah, I think that would be the first step in the design process, is just to have a doc that has, I don't know if I will have access to Snowflake or anything like that. I suppose I could get a developer account, but just maybe a matrix of known cases, and then how products handle those, and then we can decide if that looks like it would be possible to go forward. The other question I had was, is it possible or feasible to have, well, I guess two questions. Is it possible or feasible to have this be enabled by a configuration variable or a plugin, and would that be desirable to handle potential cases for, you mentioned the from clause, if people want to opt into that sort of surprising behavior, so to speak?
I would say, if when we get to implementing, if we end up implementing it, we may need a flag if there's potential, there might be some cases where, well, let me back up a moment. Ideally, we shouldn't be breaking compatibility. So generally, we add flags if we had to break compatibility, and that's a way for allowing users to migrate on their own pace. If there are things that we want to disable because they are potentially risky or experimental, we should certainly have a flag, but not as a permanent flag where it's like, well, when you install Trino, you have to decide which behavior you want. It would be a flag just as a for the transitional period. If people don't want to enable it because the feature is still in flight, there might be edge cases, they can turn it off, and then eventually when the feature stabilizes, we can say it's always on, and then the flag is removed. And we don't want to have knobs that people have to choose, especially knobs that change the behavior of the language that dramatically.
Okay. So just a general question, is there anything else that you would want to see in like other than like the behavior of other systems and projects? Is there anything else you'd want to see in like a proposal or a formal proposal document?
No, I think that would be the first step. I mean, the proposal is actually pretty clear. It's like we want to support lateral common aliases. The extent of what I guess once we understand how other databases behave, we can figure out, okay, does it make sense to what happens when there are aggregations in the expressions? What happens when there are window functions in the expressions? And we can have some hypothesis of how we want to do that, and that may be fine to propose in that document. But I think the most important thing is to understand what are all the potential edge cases so we can reason about the feature.
Okay. Thank you.
So
I have one maybe stupid question, but this is something that falls outside of the SQL specification, right?
Correct.
Yes.
But is this something that maybe someone of you is aware that actually will make it to the specification as some kind of an extension? Maybe someone is working on that, trying to like formalize that.
It's hard to tell. I mean, I'm not aware of what the next iteration of the spec has. I mean, if anyone knows anyone in any of the working groups that we can reach out, that would be great. Unfortunately, it's one of those features that it's actually very weird and strange in how it behaves compared to everything else in SQL. So I mean,
yeah, that's why I was asking, because maybe someone actually figured this out, right? Like try to formalize this somehow, like into the specification.
yeah, it would be good to know, even if there is nothing standardized yet, but there's an ongoing effort, because we could like go on top of that.
Yeah, that's I think that this service stage will actually answer this question.
Yeah, sorry. Does Trino have any contact points with the people that work on the specification that we can ask about that?
No, not right now.
Okay. I can dig and see if like I can dig up anybody from the working groups or whatever who work on that specification and see if they've talked about it at all.
Yeah, I think any contacts anyone can have there would be super helpful ultimately, and to get into that a bit more and understand better. That would be very helpful. So Kent, you're good with like working towards that, and then as a next step, Martin, once we have that, we'll figure that out together. And then I'm guessing Kent said you have engineers potentially working on that. My hunch is also this is like super complicated and like widespread across the engine. So Martin would definitely have to be involved very closely.
Yeah.
How realistic is that will we collaborate on that, Martin, given how complex it is?
I mean, yeah, it touches the analyzer and the planner. And I mean, if someone wants to, once we decide what we're gonna do, I can help whoever wants to work on that. They want to get familiarized with that part of the code, though.
Yeah, I've dug into like the Spark planner and whatnot before, but Trino is a little bit simpler for my casual viewing, that I don't have a lot of background in this. So we would have to expect that I'd have like a long ramp up time to, you know, get to the point where like we're comfortable merging any PRs that I make, I would say.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And of course, I'll help review that and provide guidance. So.
Okay.
Well, maybe it would be an opportunity to at some stage do a high level training for how that, and like a bit of code walkthrough and record and then put that also on YouTube. All right, cool. That's it from your perspective for now then, Kent, you're good? Awesome, thank you. So we have a bunch of other people here jumping into us. Anyone has anything else you want to talk about, or were you all just listening in what's happening? And that's totally fine as well, by the way.
Yeah, hi Manfred, this is Saj. I have one item I just wanted to see if that is of any interest to the community.
Yeah. Okay.
It is about the Trino client REST API. Today, the nextURI and the partial cancel URI, etc., are kind of wrapped inside that query results object, and client is the only one who might be unwrapping it. But if we can expose this nextURI and partial cancel, etc., those URIs through HTTP headers, then we can use that information for routing decisions. So the use case, or at least the partial implementation we did, is that we encode like a query parameter or HTTP request parameter into this nextURI, so that we can identify the cluster this response is coming from. So when you have multiple clusters that are proxied through a proxy, it can sort of route the request. Then when a client is giving a nextURI, it can be routed to the appropriate cluster without so today in the Trino gateway, if you look at the current implementation, they are opening up that query results object, figuring out the nextURI and recording it into a database. So that I thought is a little heavyweight operation. Instead, if we get the HTTP, the nextURI into a header, then we can easily look into it. I mean, we can inspect it.
So just see if I understand. So you want to be able to, you want the proxy to be able to inspect it so you can rewrite it, or what does it do?
Yeah, it can rewrite it, and yeah, exactly, that is what it is.
I have to remember there is a proxy in we have a proxy in Trino, the Trino code base that did something like that.
Yeah, we do, but this is more like we heavily use HA proxy for doing a lot of this routing, and our internal implementation, we basically tried this out with our own patched version of Trino instance, and it works really well. All we had to do was make the, I mean, obviously we are not modifying the version 1 protocol. All we are doing is, I mean, the nextURI is still part of the query results object. We are exposing it through the header as well, so that we are not breaking the existing protocol. So the existing clients will continue to function, but now the proxy also can inspect that value and make changes. Like it can route things differently.
That, like, I know from the Trino gateway that whole wrapping and keeping in a database is definitely a pain point that we have, and like obviously at higher scale that's also going to be a performance pain point. So like that potentially would be pretty cool. you said you have that in your fork already.
Yes.
Would that potentially be something that we could get a PR from, and would that be interesting for us to receive, Martin?
Well, so I mean, we have to think about it a bit more. One of the concerns I have, yeah. So I say I would say to start with create an issue so we can talk about it and get other people that may have thoughts involved in that. One of the potential issues I have is if we expose it in the header and we don't remove it from the query results, then if someone rewrites that URL, then how does a client, what does a client pay attention to? I mean, what is the, like, we have to specify that. I mean, it's, if you have the URL in the header and in the body, one of them has to win because it can be different. And then what does it mean that they are different? So all those, this is an evolution of the protocol we need to think about and make sure we can do in a backwards compatible way and that is reasonable. So I would say let's start with an issue where we talk about the problem, and then we can figure out if it's reasonable and to add and how we evolve the protocol to support that.
Sure. Yeah, we'll do that. And yeah, I mean, I have an answer, but I don't want to, take all the time here. Like, how the client is, I mean, how the redirection and the client communication, how that is being handled. But I will, I can probably explain all those in the issue and in the PR.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah. I'm not sure if there's any other topics or if there's no other topics that were proposed. So, I mean, if there's no one else that has anything that they want to mention, then we can talk about it now. Otherwise. So, anyone have any other topic?
Doesn't sound like it.
Yep. So, Sash, do you want to dive in quickly and explain it a little bit where you were at, or?
Oh, yeah. I can. So what we have is a green-blue arrangement, right? So we have a green cluster and a blue cluster. So blue is our primary cluster. So the end user doesn't know that. They just hit a common endpoint. And the proxy will always defaults to blue cluster because we have health check happening against the cluster. So we know blue is active, green is active, but we prefer blue cluster. So then the very first request, the HTTP post request that comes from the client, the proxy will take it and it will inject a query parameter or a HTTP request parameter into the request, into the URL, and give it to the cluster, the blue coordinator. And the query parameter will say cluster equal to blue. And the coordinator will take it, and then it will go through its process. It will prepare its response, and it will now, when it is generating the nextURI, the coordinator will add that query parameter to it. It will say the nextURI, whatever value, then it will add an extra parameter to it saying cluster equal to blue. So that will be part of the payload, right? That query results guy, plus we will have it in the HTTP header. So now the response will come back, client will receive it. Now client will trigger the nextURI with this new URL. The request will come to the proxy. Proxy will detect that the request has cluster equal to blue in it. So it knows which cluster to route that traffic to. So it will automatically send the traffic to blue. And that process will continue. Now, let's say I want to suspend traffic to blue cluster. All I need to do is to go to the proxy and say, make green as active. So what happens is the blue coordinator will continue to generate nextURI with the coordinator equal to cluster equal to blue. So client will continue to send nextURI with that URL. But if client is generating a brand new query, brand new post request, at this point, proxy will inject cluster equal to green into the URL and send it to the green cluster. And he will start generating nextURI with cluster equal to green. So now the client can continue to work with either cluster without knowing where the request is getting processed. And we can actually literally move traffic from one cluster to another. All the fresh traffic will automatically flow to a new cluster, the green cluster, but the existing traffic will continue to function against the old cluster. And it is very easy. I mean, it's clean separation, and we have it working. And one another reason, Martin, I haven't even shared it with Manfred or others. One another feature we implemented is faster data transfer. So client might be processing the received data slowly, like they are doing it in batches, right? Like each response client has to consume all the data before it asks for the next new RI. So we have implemented a solution where we can continue to receive data irrespective of client process them or not. And that is where that query parameter, the HTTP header is things that used to take hours are now getting done in 10 to 15 minutes. So it is, I mean, I will definitely have a separate conversation on that and see if that is of interest to anyone. But that is something we are actively working on. But these two features, the faster data transfer and the ability to route traffic to different clusters as needed, those two will benefit from this manipulation of header.
Okay. No, that sounds very interesting and definitely something we want to look at. So yeah, if you create that issue, and then we'll discuss it more. I'm sure David is also going to be interested to chime in on the API and all that kind of stuff. So
awesome.
Cool. Anything else? All right, my last call out is don't forget to register for Trino Fest in June. And hopefully if you can make it to Boston, also let me know if you would like to attend the Trino Contributor Congregation, which is this kind of same thing, but where we'll actually meet in person and maybe have it's going to be in the morning, so I can't say a beer, but we'll start with a coffee anyway and take it from there. And it'll be great to meet some more of you in person, or meet you again in person as well. Cool. Thank you again for joining us. This is recorded and I will put it on YouTube. We'll create a new channel and I'll link it here. I'll update the show notes and I'll also announce when we'll do the next one of these.
Cool.
Thank
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.